The silence of the ossuary was a lie. Major Cale Rourke floated in the absolute dark of the asteroid cathedral, his magnetic boots hovering inches above the carved obsidian floor. To his left and right, the members of Recon Unit 4 were ghosts, their thermal signatures scrubbed by the stealth fields, their silhouettes visible only as distortions in the starlight filtering through the shattered ceiling of the ruin. This place was ancient, a hollowed-out rock tumbling through the neutral zone, carved by a species that had vanished 10,000 years before humanity or the Lyrans had ever looked up at the sky. "Hold position," Cale signaled with a flick of his gloved fingers. The response was a single amber light blinking on his heads-up display. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Jara, was nervous. Kyle could feel it in the way the local comms channel hissed with the phantom static of her breathing. They were too deep into the corridor. The peace treaty between Earth and the Lyran Dominion was a piece of paper held together by hope and desperation. And Recon Unit 4 was currently standing on the wrong side of the invisible line. "We are clear," Yara's voice crackled in his ear. "Sensors are cold." Kyle did not relax. The ossuary was supposed to be empty, a designated heritage site where patrols were forbidden. But the intel report in his pocket computer claimed otherwise. Energy signatures, troop movements. Something was happening in the dark. "Check the north transept," Kyle whispered. He pushed off a floating pillar, drifting forward. The grandeur of the place was suffocating. The walls were lined with statues of faceless entities, their arms raised in silent screams. It was a cathedral of the dead, repurposed as a smuggling route for the living. Then the world turned white. It was not an explosion. It was a sound. A screeching, tearing electronic scream that bypassed his audio dampeners and drove spikes of agony directly into his auditory nerves. "Contact!" Yara shouted. Cale's stealth field shattered. The unexpected signal pulse acted like a hammer against a pane of glass, overloading the delicate optical camouflage arrays in their suits. Sparks showered from his shoulder pauldron as the cloaking unit fried. Across the cavernous nave of the asteroid, the darkness dissolved. They were not alone. Dozens of amber eyes ignited in the shadows. The Lyran shock troopers had been waiting, their armor the color of dried blood and polished bone, standing perfectly still among the statues. They were tall, elongated figures, their helmets faceless masks of smooth ceramic. "Ambush!" Cale roared, raising his pulse rifle. "Fall back to the airlock." It was a massacre disguised as a skirmish. The Lyrans did not shout. They did not panic. They moved with a fluid, liquid grace that made the human soldiers look like stumbling children. Plasma fire erupted, brilliant bolts of violet energy that hissed through the vacuum. Kyle saw Yara take a bolt to the chest plate. She spun backward, her suit venting atmosphere in a violent cloud of crystallized oxygen. "Jara!" He fired a suppression burst, the recoil slamming into his shoulder. But the Lyran shields absorbed the impact with shimmering indifference. They were closing in, flanked by agile drones that darted like metallic wasps. This was not a patrol. This was a hunting party. Kale scrambled for cover behind a fallen monolith, checking his diagnostics. The signal pulse had done more than kill his camouflage. It had locked his navigation. He was blind. "Surrender is the only logical outcome." A voice boomed over the open frequency. It was a synthesized voice, smooth and terrifyingly calm. "Your aggression has been noted. Never." Kyle grunted. He leaned out to fire, but his suit seized. The joints of his armor locked rigid, freezing him in place, a dampening field. He strained against the servos, his muscles screaming, but he was a statue trapped in his own technology. A shadow fell over him. A Lyran officer approached, towering over Cale's frozen form. The alien reached down, not with a weapon, but with a hand encased in gauntlets that looked like claws. With a casual, almost gentle motion, the officer ripped the rifle from Kale's grip and tossed it into the void. The officer leaned in, the ceramic faceplate inches from Kale's visor. "You are a very noisy species," the Lyran said. Then the butt of a plasma lance smashed into Kale's helmet, and the white noise of the universe went black. Waking up was a process of discovering exactly how many parts of his body were throbbing. Kale opened his eyes to a ceiling that looked like the inside of a ribcage. Curved struts of biometallic material pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, mimicking a heartbeat. The air smelled of ozone and something sweet, like rotting orchids. He tried to sit up and found he was restrained. He was strapped to a vertical slab, his arms spread wide, stripped of his armor and wearing only a thin gray prisoner's tunic. "Oh, look, the meat is conscious." Kyle turned his head. Standing by a console of floating holographic controls was a Lyran unlike the soldiers. This one was slender, wearing robes of sterile white, with a face that was severe and angular. His skin was a pale violet, and his eyes were entirely black, devoid of whites or irises. Next to the Lyran floated a small, spherical drone with a cracked lens and a jovial blue light blinking on its chassis. "I believe he is trying to grimace." The drone chirped. Or perhaps he is just ugly. It is hard to tell with humans. Their faces are so rubbery. "Who are you?" Kyle croaked. His throat felt like he had swallowed glass. "I am Vexel," the Lyran said, not looking up from his readouts. "I am the chief medical officer of the dreadnought Ethelgard. And this annoying sphere is your translator unit. We found it in your pocket. It seems to have suffered a cognitive fracture during your capture." "Hey, the drone, Chip," protested. "I am fully operational. I just have a personality now." "It's an upgrade." Kale tested the restraints. "Solid energy bands." He was not going anywhere. "Where is my team?" Vexel finally looked at him. The medic's expression was one of bored curiosity. "Dead, mostly. The ones who survived the initial volley were spaced. You, however, are the prize. An officer, a recon specialist. You are the proof Regent Protector Varoth needs to burn your border colonies to ash." Kale felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Varoth. The name was a curse word in the Earth Coalition. The leader of the Lyran war faction. A man who believed peace was a disease. "You staged the ambush," Kale said, his voice hardening. "You lured us in with that signal." Vexel tilted his head. "Did we? Or did you violate a sovereign heritage site with weapons of war? Perspective is a funny thing. Human. In the Dominion, truth is often just the story told by the person with the biggest knife." The medic pressed a control, and the slab Kale was strapped to hissed, detaching from the wall and floating upright. "You should feel honored," Vexel continued, tapping a datapad. "You are being taken to the capital, to the High Council. We usually just execute spies in the airlock, but Varoth wants a show. He wants to peel you apart, layer by layer, in front of the court. It is all very theatrical. We Lyrans do love our rituals." Chip floated closer to Kale's face. "I think what he means is, you're screwed, boss. But look on the bright side. The view from the execution spire is supposed to be fantastic. The capital of the Lyran Dominion was not built on a planet. It was a planet." As the shuttle descended from the Ethelgard, Kale saw the surface of the world below. It was entirely covered in city spires, a global ecumenopolis of silver and violet glass. But the true seat of power floated above the atmosphere, the Citadel. It was a fortress the size of a moon, suspended in geostationary orbit by gravity tethers that looked like threads of light connecting it to the world below. The architecture was dizzying, spires that spiraled into infinity, bridges made of hard light, and gardens where nebulas were trapped in glass spheres. Kyle was not given a tour. He was dragged. Two hulking guards hauled him through corridors that whispered. The walls of the citadel were psychoactive, changing color based on the mood of the court. Today, they were a deep, bruising purple, the color of anticipation. They marched him through massive doors that stood 50 feet high, opening into the Grand Council chamber. The room was an amphitheater of shadows and light. Hundreds of Lyran nobles stood on floating platforms arranged in concentric circles. They were tall, elegant, and terrifying. Their robes were woven from light-refracting silk, and their jewelry hummed with low-grade psionic energy. In the center of the room, on a dais raised high above the floor, sat the Regent Protector. Varoth was a mountain of a creature. He wore armor made of gold and the bones of some leviathan beast. His face was scarred, his eyes burning with a fanatical yellow fire. The guards threw Kale to the floor. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but he forced himself to his knees, refusing to bow. "Behold," Varoth's voice boomed, amplified by the acoustics of the chamber. "The vermin of earth." A murmur went through the crowd. It sounded like the rustling of dry leaves, captured within the sacred ossuary. Varoth continued, standing up and pointing a clawed finger at Kale, armed, cloaked, waiting to strike at our heritage. This is not a mistake. This is an act of war. Kale spat blood onto the polished floor. "We were investigating a distress signal, a signal you planted. Silence!" Varoth roared. He descended the steps of the dais, each footfall heavy and metallic. He stopped inches from Kale, looming over him. "You are not a soldier, human. You are a symptom of a sickness that believes it can coexist with the Dominion. But we will cure it." Varoth turned to the assembly, spreading his arms wide. "I demand the execution of this spy. Here, now. Let his blood seal the decree of retaliation. We will launch the fleet within the hour. We will burn their colonies until they understand that the stars belong to us." The crowd roared their approval. It was a primal, hungry sound. Kyle looked up at Varoth. He saw the glee in the regent's eyes. This was it. Kale was the match that would light the bonfire. "Bring me the blade," Varoth shouted. A servant approached, carrying a long, serrated sword on a velvet cushion. Varoth grasped the hilt, the energy field around the blade crackling to life with a hungry hum. He raised it high, the light of the weapon casting long, distorted shadows across Kale's face. Kale braced himself. He did not close his eyes. He would not give them that satisfaction. The doors to the chamber hissed open. It was not a loud sound, but it cut through the roar of the crowd like a knife. The noise in the room died instantly. Even Varoth froze, the sword held high above his head. A figure stood in the doorway. Princess Saralith Vera did not march. She glided. She was smaller than the warriors, but her presence filled the cavernous room. She wore no armor. Her gown was a cascading waterfall of midnight blue fabric that seemed to absorb the light around her. Her hair was a stark, shocking white, braided with strands of silver, and her face was a mask of terrifying serenity. She walked down the central aisle, her steps silent. The nobles parted for her like water. She did not look at Varoth. She did not look at the crowd. Her eyes, the color of a supernova's core, violet burning into white, were locked on Kale. She stopped 10 feet away. The silence was absolute. Varoth lowered his sword slowly, his jaw tightening. "Princess," he rumbled, his voice strained. "You are late. We are concluding the council." "I see," Saralith said. Her voice was soft, melodic. but it carried a weight that made the air feel heavy. You are playing with your toys again. Varath. She stepped closer to Kale. She circled him, studying him as one might study a dangerous animal in a zoo. Kale looked up at her, expecting disgust. Instead, he saw something else. She was looking at him with a strange, intense curiosity. There was a softness in her gaze that did not belong in this room of knives and sharks. It was calculating, yes, but it was not cruel. He is the proof of their aggression, Varath insisted, stepping forward to reclaim the center of attention. He must die. Sarilith ignored the regent. She crouched down, her silk robes pooling around her on the floor. She was eye level with Kale now. She reached out a hand, her long, cool fingers brushing the dirt from his cheek. Kale flinched, but he did not pull away. "What is your name?" she whispered. "Major Kale Rourke," he said, his voice raspy. "Rourke," she tested the name on her tongue. She stood up, turning her back on him to face Varath. "There will be no execution today." The room gasped. Varath's face turned a darker shade of violet. "You defy the council? The law demands blood for espionage. The law demands justice," Sarilith said coolly, "and dead men cannot answer questions." She looked back at Kale, a small, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. Then she raised her voice, clear and commanding, addressing the guards holding Kale's chains. "Bring him to my chambers." The command hung in the air, shocking and absolute. Varath sputtered. "Your chambers? Princess, this is a prisoner of war, not a—" I said. Sarilith cut him off, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that echoed off the walls. "Bring him to my chambers." She turned on her heel and walked away, her robes flowing behind her. The guards looked at Varath, then at the retreating princess. In the Dominion, the regent held the armies, but the royal blood held the soul of the people. To disobey her was heresy. Varath slammed his sword back onto the cushion, the energy blade hissing as it deactivated. "Take him!" Varath snarled, spitting the words. "Get him out of my sight!" Kale was hauled to his feet. As he was dragged out of the chamber, he looked back. Varath was watching him with a hatred so pure it felt like heat. But the whispering had already started. The nobles were leaning in, their eyes wide, repeating the command, "Bring him to my chambers." The rumors beat them to the residential wing. By the time the guards shoved Kale through the gilded blast doors of the princess's private sector, the gossip had likely reached the lower orbit. The human spy, the princess, the chambers. It was the kind of scandal that could topple governments, or start them. The guards marched him down a hallway that was less a prison and more a museum. The floor was polished marble, the walls lined with tapestries depicting star charts. They reached a set of double doors carved from white wood. The guards scanned their retinas, and the doors slid open. Inside, it was quiet. The room was vast, with a panoramic window that looked out over the curvature of the planet below. There were low couches, shelves filled with physical books, a rarity, and a strange, circular pool of water in the center of the room that steamed gently. "Leave us," a voice said. Sarilith was standing by the window, her back to them. The guards hesitated. "Highness, he is a combat specialist. He is dangerous. I am not defenseless, Captain," she said. "Leave." The guards unclasped Kyle's wrist restraints, the magnetic cuffs clattering to the floor. They bowed stiffly and backed out, the heavy doors sealing with a pneumatic hiss. Kyle rubbed his wrists, the blood returning to his hands. He stood there, tense, waiting for the trap. Sarilith turned around. The imperious mask she had worn in the council chamber was gone. In its place was a look of tired, sharp intelligence. "You look terrible, Major," she said. I've had a bad day, Kale replied, his voice dry. Usually when people want me in their bedroom, they buy me a drink first. Saralith's eyes narrowed slightly. Humor. A defense mechanism? Something like that. Kale scanned the room, checking for exits. There were none. So, what is this? Am I a trophy, a pet? Or are you just planning to kill me privately so Varath doesn't get the credit? Saralith walked over to a small table and poured a glass of clear blue liquid. She held it out to him. Drink. It is water, infused with electrolytes. You are dehydrated. Kyle hesitated, then took the glass. He downed it in one go. It tasted like rain and mint. I did not save you to humiliate you. Rourke, Saralith said, watching him closely. And I certainly did not save you for companionship. I saved you because you are the only variable in this equation that I cannot account for. Variable? Saralith tapped a control on the wall. A holographic map of the asteroid belt appeared in the air between them. The signal pulse that exposed your team, she said, pointing to a blinking red dot. It was not a standard Lyran military frequency. It was encrypted with a cipher that has not been used in 50 years. A royal cipher. Kale frowned, stepping closer to the hologram. You're saying one of your own people ratted us out? I am saying that the ambush was too perfect, Saralith said. Varath wants this war more than he wants his next breath. But he is a blunt instrument. He does not have the subtlety to fake a royal signal. She looked at Kyle, her gaze piercing. Someone inside my palace gave him the codes. Someone close to me. I need to know who. And you. You are the only one who was there who isn't on Varath's payroll. Kale laughed, a short, bitter sound. So that's the deal? I help you find a traitor, and you keep me as a house guest? You help me prove that the war is being manufactured, Saralith corrected, and I might be able to stop your execution permanently. She stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking. The air between them crackled. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was the tension of two predators realizing they were in the same cage. I don't trust you, Kale said quietly. Good, Saralith replied. Trust gets you killed in this court. I don't want your trust, Major. I want your competence. She reached out to the hologram, her fingers tracing the line of the border. My mother spent her life trying to build a peace treaty. Varath is trying to burn it. If he starts this war, billions will die. Your people, mine. Kale looked at her. He saw the fatigue behind her eyes. She wasn't a monster. She was a woman holding up the sky. Suddenly, Kale's instincts screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a shift in the air pressure, a tiny vibration in the floorboards. Down! Kale shouted. He didn't think. He moved. He lunged forward, tackling Saralith. His shoulder hit her midsection, driving her backward just as the panoramic window exploded. Thwip, thwip, thwip. 3 kinetic darts, thin as needles and faster than sound, slammed into the wall exactly where Saralith's head had been a second before. Glass rained down on them. The vacuum seal of the room whined, the emergency force fields flickering to life to plug the breach. Kyle rolled, covering Saralith with his body, shielding her from the falling debris. He looked up at the shattered window. Outside, hovering against the backdrop of the stars. A drone shimmered and vanished, a stealth unit, far more advanced than anything the military used. Kale looked down. Saralith was pinned beneath him, her white hair spread out like a halo on the marble floor. Her eyes were wide, shock warring with adrenaline. Her hands were gripping his tunic, her knuckles white. They lay there for a heartbeat, breathing hard, the reality of the moment sinking in. He wasn't her prisoner anymore. "You missed a spot," Kyle panted, nodding toward the shattered window. Saralith stared up at him, her chest heaving against his. "It appears," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "that I am not the only one with enemies." Kyle looked at the darts embedded in the wall. They were glistening with a green liquid, neurotoxin. "Well, Princess," he said, looking back into her violet eyes, "it looks like you're stuck with me." The doors burst open. Guards flooded in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Kyle slowly raised his hands, shifting his weight off Saralith but staying close enough to shield her. The game had changed. And for the first time since he'd woken up on the flagship, Cale Rourke didn't feel like a victim. He felt like a soldier with a mission. The change in status from condemned prisoner to diplomatic guest was purely administrative, but it felt like the difference between being shot and being suffocated. The morning after the assassination attempt, Cale stood in the center of Saralith's private strategy room. The shattered window had been repaired, the glass seamlessly fused back together by nanite swarms that now slept dormant in the frame. Cale was no longer wearing the gray rags of the dungeon. He was dressed in a high-collared tunic of dark charcoal fabric, tailored with military precision, though stripped of any rank or insignia. "You are now classified as a restricted diplomatic ward," Saralith announced. She stood behind a desk made of floating obsidian shards, scrolling through a holographic manifest. Kyle adjusted the collar. It felt tight. "That sounds like a fancy way of saying prisoner with a view," he said. "It means you are technically under my protection," Saralith corrected without looking up. "It means Varoth cannot execute you without triggering a constitutional crisis. It also means you cannot leave my side. If you wander past the perimeter of the royal wing, the security grid will stun you. If you try to disable the grid, it will kill you. Do you understand? Loud and clear, Your Highness." Cale checked his wrist, where a thin silver bracelet now sat. It hummed against his pulse. "So I am a pet." Saralith finally looked at him. Her violet eyes were tired, the skin beneath them shadowed. She looked less like the luminous deity of the council chamber and more like a woman who had not slept in 3 days. "You are a necessity. Rourke, do not flatter yourself." A chime sounded at the door, and it slid open before Cale could retort. 3 figures entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to shift. First was an elderly Lyran whose skin was the texture of cracked parchment. He walked with a staff that tapped rhythmically against the floor. This was Valerius, the high strategist. He looked at Cale as if he were a stain on a very expensive rug. Second was a younger woman, barely out of her adolescence by Lyran standards, with skin of vibrant lavender and eyes that sparkled with mischief. She wore a dress that seemed to be made of spun sugar and light. This was Lady Lyra, Saralith's cousin. The third figure was a shadow-given form, tall, silent, clad in armor that absorbed the light. He wore a full helmet, obscuring his face entirely. This was Thorn, the personal guard. "So this is the creature," Valerius rasped. His voice sounded like grinding stones. "It is smaller than I expected, and significantly less impressive." "Be nice, Valerius," Lyra chirped, drifting around Cale in a circle, examining him from every angle. "I think he is charming. Look at his ears. They are so round and tiny. Do you think he bites?" "Only when provoked," Cale said dryly. Lyra clapped her hands. "Delighted. It speaks, and with sarcasm. I love it. Can we keep him? Saralith, please? He is not a toy." "Lyra," Saralith said, pinching the bridge of her nose, "he is an asset. Major Rourke." This is my inner circle. These are the only 3 people in the Citadel who do not want you dead. Probably. Valerius grunted, limping over to the table. I make no promises. Bringing a human into the sanctum is madness, Princess. If Varoth finds out you are harboring a spy, he is not a spy. Sarilith cut in, her voice sharpening. He is a witness. She tapped the table, and the hologram of the asteroid belt appeared again. We have a problem. The signal that lured the Major's team into the ambush. I have traced its origin signature. It is not just a royal cipher. It is a Dominion-class beacon. The room went silent. Even Lyra stopped smiling. A Dominion-class beacon was not something a rogue captain or a smuggler could acquire. It was technology reserved for planetary defense grids and the Regent's personal armada. That implies institutional coordination, Valerius said, his tone grave. It implies that the call came from inside the house, Cale said. He crossed his arms. Whoever set us up didn't just want a skirmish. They wanted a massacre. They wanted a body count high enough to force a war. Sarilith nodded. Exactly. And to prove it, we need access to the data logs of the transmission array. But those logs are encrypted in the central archive, accessible only during high-level diplomatic functions. She looked at Kyle. Tonight is the gala of the Ascending Moons. All the High Lords will be there, including the human delegation's remote ambassadors via proxy droid. I need you to come with me. Cale raised an eyebrow. You want to take the human prisoner to a party full of people who want to exterminate his species? That sounds like a brilliant plan. You will not be human, Sarilith said. Not entirely. She gestured to Thorn. The silent bodyguard stepped forward, opening a small metal case he had been carrying. Inside lay a small, fleshy patch that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. A bioadaptive disguise implant, Sarilith explained. It attaches to the base of the skull. It will project a psionic filter over your features. To anyone looking at you, you will appear as a Xyloian mercenary, a humanoid species from the outer rim. Neutral, boring, invisible. And if it fails, Cale asked, then the evening will become very exciting. Very quickly, Lyra said with a grin. The installation of the implant was not pleasant. It felt like a hornet stinging the back of his neck, followed by a sensation of cold water trickling down his spine. Cale stood before a mirror in the prep room. The reflection that stared back was him, but wrong. His skin had a greenish tint, his jaw was slightly wider, and his eyes were a solid, milky yellow. Uncanny, Chip remarked. The drone was hovering near his ear, having been repaired by the palace engineers. You look like you ate some bad shellfish and then decided to haunt a graveyard. Thanks. Chip, Cale muttered. He turned as Sarilith entered the room. Cale stopped. He had seen her in the War Council, armored in authority. He had seen her in her chambers, weary and vulnerable. But this was something else. She wore a gown that defied physics. It was made of a fabric that shifted color with her movement, transitioning from deep indigo to the pale blue of a morning sky. The bodice was structured like armor, plated in silver, but the skirt flowed like liquid smoke. Her white hair was pulled up in an intricate weave, pinned with diamonds that glowed with their own internal light. She looked breathtaking, and she looked like a weapon. Close your mouth, Major, she said, adjusting her gloves. It ruins the disguise. Cale cleared his throat. You clean up nice. Princess. This is not fashion. Rourke, it is camouflage. In the court, if you look weak, you are eaten. If you look too strong, you are targeted. One must look inevitable. She walked over to him, reaching up to check the implant on his neck. Her fingers were cool against his skin. For a moment, she was very close. He could smell the scent of ozone and crushed flowers that seemed to follow her. He looked down at her. She was focused on the tech, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. "Only when I think about it," Cale said. She pulled back, her eyes meeting his. The yellow contact lenses of his disguise hid his true eye color, but the intensity of his gaze was the same. "Stay close to me tonight," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The court is a shark tank, but unlike sharks, my people smile before they bite." "And what do I do?" Cale asked. "You dance," she said. "You drink, and while I distract the room, you use that little drone of yours to scan the archive nodes in the ballroom walls." She turned and headed for the door. "Try not to start a war before the appetizers are served." The grand ballroom of the Citadel was a masterpiece of excess. The ceiling was a transparent dome, revealing the swirling colors of the nebula outside. Gravity in the room was set to 90% of standard, giving everyone a slight, graceful bounce to their steps. Floating orbs of light drifted through the air like lazy fireflies, changing color to match the music that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Cale walked a step behind Saralith, keeping his head lowered in the respectful posture of a hired guard. Thorn flanked them on the other side, a silent monolith. The room was packed. Lyran nobles in impossible finery mingled with ambassadors from a dozen subject worlds. The air was filled with the murmur of polite conversation, which Cale assumed was mostly lies. "Ah, Princess Saralith," a voice oiled with false charm cut through the noise. A tall, spindly Lyran with elaborate facial tattoos glided toward them. He held a goblet of swirling red liquid. "Lord Malcor," Saralith said, inclining her head the bare minimum required by protocol. "I see you have returned from the Rim territories." "I have," Malcor said, his eyes flicking over her, then landing dismissively on Cale. "And I see you have brought a stray, my new security consultant," Saralith said smoothly. "From Zeloya." "Fascinating," Malcor drawled. "I heard rumors you were keeping more exotic pets these days. A human, perhaps?" The word hung in the air. Cale stiffened but forced his muscles to relax. "Rumors are the currency of the board, Lord Malcor," Saralith said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I would not spend too much time on them." Malcor stepped closer, invading her personal space. He held out his glass. A toast, then, "To the destruction of our enemies. All of them." Saralith took a glass from a passing hover tray. "To the protection of the Dominion." They drank. It was a duel disguised as a drink. Cale watched the room. Chip was buzzing silently in his pocket, running a passive scan. Scanning. Archive node detected in the north wall, behind the tapestry of the weeping sun. Cale tapped his ear twice. The signal. Saralith saw it. She handed her empty glass to a servant. "Lord Malcor, if you will excuse me, I must pay my respects to the elder matriarch." She moved away, and Cale followed. They weaved through the crowd, passing displays of telepathic art, statues that projected emotions into the minds of those who looked at them. Cale made the mistake of glancing at a sculpture of a weeping child and felt a sudden, crushing wave of grief that nearly brought him to his knees. He shook it off, gasping. "Careful," Saralith murmured. "Do not engage with the art. It is rude to stare." They reached the north wall. The tapestry was massive, depicting a sun exploding in slow motion. "Stand here," Saralith whispered. "Look imposing." She turned to engage a group of dignitaries, her back to the wall. Kale leaned back against the tapestry, letting chips slide out of his pocket and into the folds of the fabric. While the drone worked, Kale observed the threat rituals Sarilith had warned him about. He saw two officers challenge each other. Instead of drawing weapons, they exchanged a series of incredibly complex bows and compliments. Your honor is as vast as the void, brother, and your courage is a beacon that blinds the unworthy. I am unworthy to stand in your shadow. Then perhaps you should move. The last line was delivered with a smile, but the menace was palpable. The loser of the exchange bowed deeply and retreated, his social standing visibly diminished. It was a battlefield where words were shrapnel. Sarilith returned to his side. Did you get it? Chip buzzed back into his pocket. Data acquired, but it's encrypted. I need time. We have time, Kale said. Suddenly, the music changed. The rhythmic thrumming shifted to a soaring, complex melody. The floor cleared. It is the dance of the spheres, Sarilith said, her body tense. I must participate. It is mandatory for the blood royal. She looked at Kale, and my partner is supposed to be the regent. Across the room, Varoth was approaching. He looked massive in his ceremonial armor, a cape of black velvet trailing behind him. Sarilith, Varoth rumbled. Shall we? Kale watched her. He saw the revulsion ripple through her, suppressed instantly by years of discipline. She was about to take his hand when Kale stepped forward. Forgive me, Lord Regent, Kale said, his voice modulated by the implant to sound deeper, rougher. But the princess has promised this dance to her guard. It is a Zeloyan custom, to ensure her safety on the floor. Varoth stopped. He looked down at Kale, his yellow eyes burning. A custom, Varoth sneered. Since when does the Dominion bow to the customs of hired help? Since the princess's life was threatened yesterday, Kale said, meeting his gaze. Or have you forgotten? The room went deadly silent. It was an insult, a direct challenge. Varoth's hand twitched toward his weapon, but Sarilith laughed. It was a light, airy sound that broke the tension. He is very protective, my Zeloyan. Very well. Varoth, surely you would not deny a shaken woman her sense of security. Varoth stared at Kale for a long second. Then he sneered, Dance then. But watch your step. Mercenary. The floor is slippery. Sarilith took Kale's hand. Her grip was iron hard. You are insane, she hissed as they moved to the center of the floor. I just saved you from dancing with the guy who wants you dead, Kale whispered back. You're welcome. The music swelled. The dance was not like anything on Earth. It involved shifting gravity fields. The dancers floated, spun, and dove. Kyle, relying on his combat training and the subtle cues Sarilith squeezed into his hand, managed to keep up. They spun together, rising 10 feet into the air. Why did you do that? She asked, her face inches from his. Because he scares you, Kyle said. I am not scared of him. Yes, you are, and you should be. He's a monster. But for the next 5 minutes, he's just a spectator. Sarilith looked at him. The yellow contact lenses couldn't hide the way he looked at her. For a moment, amidst the swirling lights and the alien music, the political game faded. You are a strange man. Kale Rourke, she whispered. They landed as the music ended. The court applauded, a polite rhythmic clapping. Sarilith curtsied. Kyle bowed. Let's get out of here, she said. I need air. The balcony was a relief. The noise of the party was muffled by the heavy glass doors. Outside, the nebula was a ribbon of purple and gold across the sky. The air was cool. Sarilith leaned against the railing, stripping off her gloves. She looked exhausted. Kyle stood a few feet away, giving her space. "It's a lot, isn't it?" he said after a moment. "What is? Performing? Pretending you're invincible?" Saralith laughed, a brittle sound. "It is my life. Rourke, I was born into a cage of gold and expectations. My mother wanted peace, Varath wants war. And I am just the fulcrum they are both trying to break." She turned to face him. "Sometimes I wish I could just let go. Let the galaxy burn. Why is it my job to save it because you're the only one who can?" Kale said. He moved closer to the railing. He looked at her, stripping away the rank, the title, the species. He saw a lonely woman standing on a precipice. "I lost my team," Kale said quietly. "Yara, Miller, Vance. They died in the dark because someone wanted to make a point. I can't bring them back, but I can make sure their deaths mean something. That's why I'm here. Not for your politics, but because I owe them the truth." Saralith looked at him. The vulnerability in her eyes was stark. "We are both prisoners, aren't we?" she whispered. She reached out, her hand hovering near his arm. It was a tentative gesture, a bridge being built over a chasm of mistrust. Chip buzzed in Kale's pocket, shattering the moment. "Decryption complete. You are not going to like this." Kale pulled the drone out. "What have you got?" "The signal," Chip said, projecting a small hologram. "It didn't come from the fleet. It came from the Citadel, specifically from a localized transmitter in the West Wing, the Museum of Conquest." Saralith stiffened. "The museum. That is where we keep the relics of the First Contact War." "Why would the signal come from there?" Kyle asked. "Because," Saralith said, her eyes widening, "no one goes there. It is a tomb of old technology, the perfect place to hide a transmitter." "We need to go," Kyle said. "Now." Before they could move, the balcony doors slid open. Well, a voice sneered. It was Lord Malcor again, accompanied by 2 guards. He looked drunk on wine and power. "I knew there was something wrong with you," Malcor said, pointing a shaking finger at Kale. "You don't move like a Xyloian. You move like a soldier." He stepped onto the balcony. "And I hear rumors, Princess, that you are keeping the human alive. Is this him? Is this your war prize?" He spat the words like an obscenity. "Taking a human to your bed is one thing, Saralith, but dressing him up and parading him at the gala, it is perversion." Saralith's expression went cold. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp anger. She did not shout. She did not defend herself. She stepped forward, her voice low and deadly. "You speak of perversion. Malcor, you who sold the grain reserves of the Outer Rim to buy a new pleasure yacht while your people starved." Malcor blinked, taken aback. That is irrelevant, is it?" Saralith continued, closing the distance. "You question my judgment? You question my choice of retinue? Perhaps we should discuss your judgment. Perhaps we should discuss the unauthorized comms channels found on your personal shuttle last month." Malcor paled. The color drained from his tattoos. I do not know what you mean." Saralith smiled. It was a shark's smile. "I think you do. Now, leave, before I decide to make your private finances a matter of public debate." Malcor stammered, bowed hastily, and practically ran back inside. Kale let out a low whistle. "Remind me never to piss you off." "He was a fool," Saralith said, her hands trembling slightly. "But he is right about one thing. We are running out of time. If he suspects, Varoth knows." She looked at Kale, to the museum. The Museum of Conquest was dark and dusty, It smelled of old metal and stagnation. The exhibits were grotesque, shattered hulls of human ships, captured flags, and suits of armor with bullet holes in the chests. It was a shrine to human defeat. Cale felt a spike of anger but pushed it down. He followed the signal on Chip's display. Stronger, warmer, hot, Chip chirped. They stopped in front of a display case holding a rusted piece of debris. It looked like an old engine component. "This is it," Cale said. He smashed the glass with the butt of a display stand. The alarm didn't sound. Saralith had disabled the sector security. Cale reached into the debris. It wasn't solid. It was a shell. He pried it open. Inside, nestled in the hollowed-out metal, was a device. It was small, black, and humming with a faint red light. But it wasn't Lyran technology. It was blocky, utilitarian. It was human. Cale stared at it, his blood running cold. "It's a quantum entanglement transmitter," he said, his voice hollow. "Military grade. Earth spec." Saralith looked at it, then at him. This is how they are doing it," she said. "Someone on Earth is not just talking to Varoth. They are feeding him data, troop movements, patrol routes." Cale turned the device over. On the bottom, stamped into the metal, was a serial number and a logo. He recognized it instantly. It was the insignia of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. "It's not a rogue general," Cale whispered. "It's the diplomats. The people pretending to negotiate for peace are the ones selling us out." Saralith gripped his arm. "We have the proof," she said. "Now we need to survive long enough to use it." Kyle looked at her. In the dim light of the museum, surrounded by the wreckage of a previous war, the stakes suddenly became very real. "This isn't just a coup," Kyle said grimly. "It's a setup. They're manufacturing a war to wipe out the opposition on both sides. And we," Saralith said, taking the transmitter from his hand, "are the only ones standing in the way." Cale looked at the device, then back at the princess. "Then let's start a riot," as if on cue. The sound of heavy boots echoed in the corridor outside. "Varoth's guards," Cale said, recognizing the cadence. "They found us." Saralith pulled a small, elegant energy pistol from the folds of her gown. She checked the charge with a calm click. "Ready, Major?" Cale grabbed a heavy Lyran spear from a display rack, testing its weight, always. "Princess." He stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, as the doors began to buckle under the assault. The gala was over. The war had begun. The transmitter sat on the obsidian desk like a coiled viper. It was a blocky, utilitarian piece of Earth tech, scarred by scratches and smelling of ozone, looking utterly out of place amidst the flowing liquid architecture of Princess Saralith's private sanctum. "I need to send the code," Cale said. He stood on the opposite side of the desk, his posture rigid. "If I do not check in with a specific frequency by 0800 hours, Command will assume I am dead. That triggers a secondary protocol. They will send a stealth bomber wing to flatten the sector." Saralith did not look at the device. She looked at Cale. She was seated, her hands folded perfectly in her lap, but the tension in her neck betrayed her calm facade. "And if you send it," she said, her voice cool and measured, "you expose my internal grid to the United Earth military network. You are asking me to open the gates of my home to the very people who have their fingers on the trigger. I am asking you to stop them from pulling it," Cale countered. He leaned forward, placing his palms on the desk. "You saw the device in the museum. You know there is a leak. If I wrote this through your encryption, it masks the origin. They will get the message, but they won't get your coordinates." Saralith stood up slowly. She walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling bioluminescent veins of the capital city. To route a foreign signal through the royal key is treason. Rourke. If Varoth discovers I have done this, he will not need a trial. He will have me disintegrated for compromising planetary security. Kale watched her back. He realized, Tana, with a sudden jolt of clarity, that she was not arguing about the logistics. She was arguing about the price of her life. Then don't do it for me, Kyle said, his voice softer. Do it because if those bombers come, your reformist coalition dies in the fire. Saralith turned. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. She walked back to the desk, her eyes locking onto his. If you betray me, Major, she whispered, I will not kill you. I will make you wish for the simplicity of execution. She placed her hand over the console. The desk hummed, and a holographic interface bloomed in the air, a complex mandala of violet light. Connect it, she commanded. Kale plugged the rugged transmitter into the port. He typed the sequence rapidly. Alpha, Sierra, 9, status, alive, intel compromised, awaiting instructions. The message flashed and vanished, swallowed by the Lyran encryption algorithms. It is done, Saralith said, exhaling a breath she seemed to have been holding for minutes. Now, we wait. And while we wait, you must learn how not to die. The royal dojo was a garden of pain. Unlike human gyms, which smelled of sweat and rubber, this place smelled of jasmine and ionized air. The floor was a bed of soft, moss-like vegetation that hardened on impact, and the walls were lined with racks of practice weapons made of humming light glass. Again, Saralith ordered. Kale picked himself up from the moss. His ribs ached. For a woman who looked like she was made of porcelain, Saralith hit like a freight train. You are telegraphing, she said, circling him with a practice staff. In Lyran combat, the intent must be invisible. You wind up like a heavy machine. By the time you throw a punch, I have already written a poem about how I intend to dodge it. Kale wiped sweat from his brow. That is because you fight like it is a dance. On Earth, if you are dancing, you are dying. We don't care about form. We care about results. He lunged. Saralith pivoted, graceful and fluid, ready to deflect his strike with a standard parry. But Kale did not strike. He feinted high, dropped his shoulder, and swept her leg. It was a dirty move, a bar brawl move. Saralith lost her footing. She gasped, falling backward. But before she hit the ground, she twisted in midair, using the momentum to kick off a pillar and land on her feet, albeit 3 meters away. She stared at him, eyes wide. You cheated. I won, Kale corrected, straightening up. That is the difference. You fight for honor. I fight to go home. If you want to survive Varoth's assassins, you need to stop waiting for them to bow. Chip, the drone, floated down from the ceiling where it had been observing. Its blue optic light pulsed rapidly. Analysis complete, the drone chirped. Physical proximity, 0.5 meters. Heart rate synchronization, 98%. Pheromone levels, critical. Both Kale and Saralith turned to glare at the machine. What are you talking about? Kale asked. My new romance algorithm, Chip explained proudly. I have been analyzing Lyran court dramas. According to my data, this level of physical violence combined with heavy breathing and intense eye contact is a precursor to a courtship ritual. Shall I dim the lights? Shut up, Chip, they said in unison. Saralith straightened her tunic, though Kale noticed a faint flush of violet on her cheeks. Your droid is defective, she muttered. He is learning, Kale said, suppressing a grin. But he has a point. You are stiff. You are terrified of making a mistake. I cannot afford mistakes. Rourke. Kale walked over to the weapon rack and picked up a second staff. He tossed it to her. Then make them here, with me, where it doesn't count. Sarilith caught the staff. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, the icy perfection of the princess cracked, revealing the fighter beneath. Show me this. Faint, she said. The attack happened at lunch. It was supposed to be a safe event, a private viewing of the solar harvest with a few select courtiers in the hanging gardens. Kyle was standing behind Sarilith's chair, playing the role of the silent guardian. The table was laden with exotic fruits and crystalline carafes of nectar. A servant poured a glass of golden wine for Sarilith. Then, with a slight tremble in his hand, he poured a glass of water for Kale. Kale watched the liquid settle. His instincts, sharpened by the paranoia of the last few days, pricked at him. But he was thirsty, and refusing hospitality was a diplomatic insult. He lifted the glass. He took a sip. The reaction was instantaneous. It felt like someone had detonated a grenade in his throat. His windpipe seized. His vision went white, then red. He dropped the glass, the crystal shattering on the stone floor, and fell to his knees, clawing at his neck. Kale. Sarilith's voice was a scream. The courtiers gasped and scattered. Guards rushed forward, weapons drawn, unsure of the threat. Sarilith dropped to her knees beside him. She grabbed his face, her hands shaking. Poison, she hissed, neuroparalytic. Kale couldn't breathe. His lungs were stone. He looked up at her, his vision tunneling, seeing only her terrified eyes. Vareth, he thought. He didn't want a show trial anymore. He just wanted the problem gone. Make space, Sarilith roared at the guards. She did not wait for a medic. She ripped a pendant from her neck, a small vial of glowing blue liquid encased in silver filigree. It was a universal antidote, reserved only for the blood royal, worth more than a starship. She bit the seal off with her teeth and jammed the vial into Kale's mouth. Swallow, she commanded. Swallow it, damn you! The liquid burned like ice. It hit his throat and the paralysis shattered. Kale gasped, a ragged, desperate sound, sucking in air as if he were drowning. He coughed violently, his body expelling the toxins, collapsing forward into Sarilith's arms. She held him. She didn't care about the stains on her silk gown. She didn't care about the courtiers whispering behind their hands. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders, pulling him close, her chin resting on his sweating head. He is under my protection, she shouted at the room, her voice trembling with rage. Anyone who touches him answers to me. Kale wheezed, his head spinning. He felt the rapid beat of her heart against his chest. It wasn't the heartbeat of a politician. It was the heartbeat of a woman who had almost lost something she didn't realize she valued. Chip hovered close by, scanning Kale's vitals. Romance algorithm update, the drone whispered. Possessiveness factor, off the charts. We are definitely getting married. The Undercity was the shadow that the shining citadel cast, located at the base of the massive gravity tethers. It was a sprawling labyrinth of neon fog, black markets, and steam. Here, the beautiful laws of the Dominion did not apply. Kyle and Sarilith moved through the crowded alleyways, faces hidden beneath heavy hooded cloaks. Kale was still weak from the poison, his movements stiff, but the bioadaptive disguise was active, making him look like a scarred Xyloian mercenary. Sarilith was disguised as a lower-caste tech merchant. This is insanity, Sarilith whispered. If the royal guard finds us here, then they won't recognize you, Kale murmured. Keep your head down. We're close. They were following the trace from the transmitter found in the museum. The signal had bounced through a relay node down here, in a sector known as the Circuit Graveyard. The market was a sensory assault. Stalls sold unauthorized cybernetics, hallucinogenic gases, and alien pets. But as they moved deeper, the atmosphere changed. The crowd ahead was swaying. Hundreds of beings, Lyrans, humans, other species, were gathered around a large, makeshift stage. On the stage, a merchant was demonstrating a device. It looked like a tuning fork made of black chrome. "Observe!" the merchant shouted. The device hummed with a low, throbbing frequency. Instantly, the crowd went silent. Their faces went slack. Then, the merchant turned a dial. Euphoria. The crowd gasped in unison. Strangers embraced. People wept with sudden, overwhelming joy. It was unnatural. A wave of chemical happiness that washed over them. Kyle felt it too. A sudden urge to laugh, to relax, to forget the war. He bit the inside of his cheek, using the pain to anchor himself. "Look," Saralith whispered, gripping his arm. The merchant turned the dial the other way. Rage. The crowd roared. The embracing strangers shoved each other away. Fists flew. A Lyran worker smashed a bottle over a human's head. The violence was instantaneous and mindless. It's not just communication, Kale realized, horror dawning on him. It's a psych weapon. They are testing it on the lower castes. "We have to document this," Saralith said. She raised her wrist to record the scene. A hand clamped onto her shoulder. "You seem interested in the merchandise," a voice rasped. They turned. 3 figures stood behind them. They wore black armor with no insignia, and their faces were covered by polished black visors. The secret police, Varroth's shadows. "Run," Kale said. He didn't wait. He grabbed a canister of pressurized steam from a nearby stall and smashed the valve. A cloud of scalding white fog erupted, blinding the agents. "Go!" Kale shoved Saralith toward a maintenance hatch. Plasma bolts hissed through the fog, searing the air. Kale drew the concealed blaster Saralith had given him and fired blindly, providing cover. They sprinted through the twisting alleys, the heavy boots of the pursuers pounding behind them. "To the gravity vents," Saralith shouted. She led him toward a massive, rusting structure, the intake for the city's anti-gravity stabilizers. It was a vertical maze of shifting platforms and fluctuating gravity fields. "Jump!" she yelled. They leaped off a catwalk, falling into the abyss. For a second, they plummeted. Then, the gravity field caught them. Down became up. They slammed onto a ceiling, scrambling for purchase. "This way." They ran across the underside of a walkway, the city inverted above them. The pursuers were hesitating at the edge. Kyle looked back. One of the agents jumped, magnetic boots engaging. "He is following!" Kyle shouted. Saralith pulled a lever on a maintenance panel. "Gravity shift in 3 seconds." They braced themselves against a stanchion. The world flipped. The agent, caught in midair between 2 fields, lost his orientation. He screamed as the opposing forces tore at him, flinging him sideways into a ventilation fan with a sickening crunch. Kale and Saralith were thrown against the wall, the breath knocked out of them. They were safe, for the moment, deep in the bowels of the city's infrastructure. They limped back into the safety of her chambers 3 hours later. Kale collapsed onto the floor, his disguise flickering and fading as the power cell died. He was bruised, his tunic torn, and the lingering effects of the poison were making his hands shake. Saralith leaned against the door, locking it. She slid down to the floor, her hood falling back to reveal her disheveled white hair. She was breathing hard, her face streaked with grime from the Undercity. "We made it," she whispered, as if she couldn't quite believe it. Kale looked at her. She wasn't the princess right now. She was just Saralith. He crawled over to her. "Let me see that arm." She had taken a grazing shot from a plasma bolt during the escape. The fabric of her sleeve was burned away, revealing angry, blistered skin. "It is nothing," she said, wincing as he inspected it. It's not nothing. Kale reached for the first aid kit she kept in the room. He applied a cooling gel to the burn. She watched him work. Her eyes traced the line of his jaw, the focus in his expression. "Why did you save me?" she asked softly. "Down there. You could have let them take me. You could have run." Kale paused. He looked up. "I told you," he said. "I don't leave my team behind." Sarilith let out a shaky breath. "Is that what we are? A team?" "I don't know," Kale admitted. "We're definitely not enemies anymore." The air in the room shifted. It became heavy, charged with the same electricity that had been building since the dojo. The adrenaline of the escape was fading, leaving a raw, exposed nerve of desire. Sarilith reached out with her good hand. She touched the side of his face. Her fingers were cool, trembling slightly. "I have never been seen," she whispered. "Everyone sees the title, or the target, or the symbol. You look at me and you just see a problem to be solved." "A very difficult problem," Kale murmured, leaning into her touch. He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't. She was royalty, and he was a grunt from a planet she could order destroyed. But the pull was magnetic. He turned his head, kissing the palm of her hand. Sarilith let out a soft sound, half gasp, half sob. She leaned forward, her forehead resting against his. "If I fall." "Kale," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "The coalition falls. Varath will purge the reformists. Millions will die. I am so tired of holding it all up. Let me carry it for a while," Kale said. He kissed her. It wasn't the polite, courtly kiss of a diplomat. It was desperate. It tasted of smoke and fear and relief. Sarilith responded with a fierce intensity, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving universe. They didn't go further. They didn't need to. The intimacy of the moment, the shared breath, the tangled limbs, the acknowledgement of mutual need was more profound than any physical act. They lay on the floor of the royal chambers, two soldiers from warring worlds, finding a momentary peace in the shadow of the coming storm. A chime from the desk broke the silence. They pulled apart, breathless. Kale cleared his throat, standing up and offering her a hand. Sarilith took it, smoothing her torn clothes, her mask of composure slowly sliding back into place. "The message," she said. They walked to the desk. The holographic interface was blinking red. Kale decrypted the file. It was a text burst, short and scrambled. Identity confirmed. Rourke, Kale. Status, disavowed. Warning, command is compromised. Order 66B in effect. Do not return to Sector 4. Trust no one. End transmission. Kale stared at the words. "Disavowed. They aren't coming for me," he said, his voice dead. "They've written me off, and my command? They know about the conspiracy. They're part of it." Sarilith looked at the data they had gathered from the Undercity, the financial trails of the smugglers. She overlaid it with the transmitter logs. "Look," she said, pointing to a series of transactions. The money flowing into Varath's war chest wasn't just Lyran credits. It was being routed through shell companies. Orion Heavy Industries, Vera Tech, the Terran Lyran Trade Guild. Kale felt sick. "It's not a war," he whispered. "It's a merger." Sarilith nodded, her face pale. "Varath isn't the mastermind. He is just an employee. And so is your leadership." She looked at Kale, horror dawning in her violet eyes. "A shadow consortium," she said. "Spanning both our species. They want this war to drive up demand for their weapons, their ships, their psych tech. They are going to grind our civilizations into dust just to improve their quarterly margins." Cale slammed his fist onto the desk. Then we don't just stop the war, he growled. We break the bank. How? Sarilith asked. We are two people against two empires. Cale looked at her. He saw the fire returning to her eyes. We have the evidence, he said. We have the transmitter. And tomorrow is the coronation of stars. Every system in the galaxy will be watching. He picked up the transmitter. We're going to crash the party, Princess. And we're going to tell everyone exactly who is paying for the drinks. The plan was simple in conception and suicidal in execution. They were going to hijack the most watched event in the galaxy. The coronation of stars was not merely a ceremony, it was a gravitational event. Every 10 cycles, the celestial alignment of the Lyran home system allowed for a transfer of energy between the orbital spires, a ritual that symbolized the renewal of the Dominion's mandate. It was broadcast to 300 systems. Billions of eyes would be watching the dais where Princess Sarilith Vera stood, and standing next to her, in a break with 4,000 years of protocol, would be a human. We are not just walking into a trap, Cale said, adjusting the high, stiff collar of his ceremonial dress uniform. We are walking into a trap, handing the traitors a loaded gun and asking them to smile for the camera. Sarilith sat on a velvet stool, while 3 handmaidens braided diamonds into her hair. She met his gaze in the mirror. It is the only way. Rourke, Vareth expects us to hide. He expects us to cower in the shadows with our little piece of evidence while he spins the narrative. If we stand in the light, if we show the galaxy that a human and a Lyran can stand side by side without bloodshed, we destroy his premise before he can even launch his ships. Kyle tugged at the sash across his chest. It was embroidered with the sigil of the diplomatic ward, a golden bird with clipped wings. I feel like a prized poodle, he muttered. You look like a statesman, Sarilith corrected. Now, stop fidgeting. We have 2 hours before the broadcast, and you still cannot distinguish between the bow of gratitude and the bow of mortal challenge. The training montage that followed would have been comedy gold if the stakes were not life and death. Lady Lyra, acting as the drill instructor of etiquette, was relentless. The royal wing echoed with her sharp commands and Cale's groans of frustration. No! 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 Lyra shouted, slapping Cale's leg with a fan. You are bending from the waist. That is how a merchant greets a customer. You must bend from the knees, keeping the spine rigid. It signifies that your burden is heavy, but your spirit is unbroken. I have a slipped disc that is about to be unbroken, Kyle grumbled, attempting the maneuver again and looking like a man trying to sit on an invisible chair. And the greeting? Lyra prompted. May the stars illuminate your debt? Cale tried. Lyra facepalmed. Illuminate your path, Major. If you tell the High Priest to illuminate his debt, he will have you ritually scourged. It wasn't just the physical comedy, it was the public perception. As part of the strategy, Sarilith had him accompany her to the preliminary rites, blessing the city's water supply, inspecting the honor guard. Cale, exhausted and operating on caffeine and adrenaline, stopped trying to be the perfect Lyran courtier and started being a human. When a nervous young flower girl dropped her basket during a procession, Kyle didn't wait for a servant to clear the debris. He knelt down, helped her pick up the petals, and gave her a high five. The girl giggled. The crowd, used to the icy detachment of their nobility, went wild. When he mispronounced the title of the Minister of Agriculture as the Lord of Tasty Roots, the video went viral within minutes. But instead of outrage, the comments were filled with amusement. He tries, they said. He is not arrogant. By the morning of the coronation, the narrative was splitting. To the hardliners, Kale was a parasite infecting the throne, but to the tired masses, he and Sarilith were something new, a symbol, the consort of peace. The headlines screamed. Sarilith read the datapad as they waited in the staging antechamber. "They are calling you a consort," she noted, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I have been called worse," Kyle said. He checked the hidden pocket of his sash. The data drive with the evidence of the consortium's financial trail was taped to his ribs. "Are you ready?" Sarilith looked at the massive doors leading to the balcony. Beyond them, the roar of the crowd was a physical vibration in the floor. "No," she whispered. She reached out and took his hand. Her grip was tight, her palm sweating. Kyle squeezed back. "Just remember, if I trip, you catch me. If you trip, I turn it into a dance move." The doors opened. The scale of the coronation was difficult for the human mind to process. The ceremonial amphitheater was a floating platform the size of a city, suspended in the upper atmosphere. Around it, thousands of anti-gravity yachts and pleasure barges hovered in concentric rings. Above, the fleet performed synchronized maneuvers, trailing colored plasma. Sarilith and Kale walked out onto the central dais. The sunlight caught the jewels in her hair and the gold on his sash. A roar went up, a mixture of cheers and jeers, a chaotic wall of sound. Sarilith walked with her head high, radiating that terrifying calm that Kale had come to admire. Kale walked a half step behind her, keeping his eyes moving, scanning the crowd, the VIP boxes, the sky. Chip, his drone, was concealed in his epaulette. Scanning for threats, the AI whispered in his ear, "I am detecting elevated heart rates in Sector 4. Also, Lady Lyra is crying in the front row. She really ships us, boss." They reached the podium. The high priest, a towering figure in robes of shifting smoke, began the invocation. It was a long, droning speech about the purity of Lyran blood and the sanctity of the void. Kale tuned it out, watching Varath. The regent stood on the opposite side of the podium. He was not looking at the priest, he was looking at Kale. And he was smiling. Not a gloating smile, a patient smile. Kale's stomach dropped. He knows. Sarilith stepped forward to give her address. She took a breath, preparing to deviate from the teleprompter, preparing to accuse the most powerful men in the galaxy of treason. "Citizens of the Dominion," she began, her voice amplified across the atmosphere. "We stand today at a crossroads." And then the world ended. It started with a scream from the VIP box. Then, a flash of light. An explosion ripped through the hull of a luxury barge floating near the platform. It wasn't a small blast. The ship disintegrated, raining burning debris down into the clouds below. Screams erupted. Panic rippled through the amphitheater like a shockwave. "Threat detected," Chip screamed. "Incoming transmission on all global frequencies. Look at the screens," someone shouted. Above the amphitheater, the massive holographic billboards that were broadcasting Sarilith's face flickered and changed. A new image appeared. It was Kale. But it wasn't the Kale standing on the podium. It was Kale in a dark room, wearing combat armor, holding a detonator. "My name is Kale Rourke," the digital avatar said, the voice synthesized to perfection. "And this is for Earth. The Dominion falls today." On the screen, the avatar pressed the button. Another barge exploded in the distance. It was a deep fake, a masterpiece of digital forgery. "Assassin!" a noble shouted. "Kill the human!" The mood of the crowd shifted instantly from curiosity to bloodlust. They surged forward against the energy barriers. Varath stepped up to the microphone, his voice booming like thunder. "Treason! The human has betrayed our hospitality. He has brought terror to our holy day. Guards, Vareth pointed a massive finger at Kale. "Seize him!" Kale reached for his weapon, but he had none. He was ceremonial window dressing. He backed up, putting himself back to back with Sarilith. "It's a lie!" Sarilith shouted, but her microphone had been cut. A squad of royal guards, Vareth's hand-picked elites, rushed the podium. Sarilith grabbed Kale's arm. Her eyes were wide, frantic. "If you fight, they will kill you right here," she hissed. "If I don't fight, they'll execute me later. Trust me," she pleaded. The guards surrounded them, leveling their spears. Vareth strode forward. "Princess, step away from the terrorist, unless you wish to be branded a co-conspirator." Sarilith looked at Kale. For a split second, Kale saw the heartbreak in her eyes. Then, the mask slammed down. The cold, imperious face of the royal heir returned. She shoved Kale away, hard. He stumbled back into the grip of the guards. "Take him," Sarilith said, her voice dripping with ice. "Get this filth out of my sight." Kale stared at her, playing his part, letting the shock show on his face. "Sarilith!" he shouted. "Silence him!" Vareth commanded. A guard struck Kale in the stomach with the butt of a spear. He folded, gasping for air. As they dragged him away, bruised and humiliated, he looked back. Sarilith was standing alone on the podium, watching him go. She did not look like a winner. She looked like a statue made of ice, slowly cracking under the heat of a billion angry eyes. The cell in the containment block was designed to break the mind. It was perfectly white, perfectly silent, and the lights never dimmed. Kale sat on the floor, his ceremonial uniform torn and bloodied. They had taken the data drive. They had taken Chip. He was alone. He counted the seconds. It had been 4 hours since the arrest. The execution would likely be at dawn. Vareth wouldn't wait for a trial, not with the mob baying for blood outside the Citadel gates. The door hissed. Kale looked up, expecting the executioner. Instead, a figure in a heavy hooded cloak stepped in. The figure tapped the control panel, and the security camera in the corner sparked and died. The hood came down. Sarilith. She looked wrecked. The diamonds were gone from her hair, and her eyes were red-rimmed. She carried a bundle of clothes. "Put these on," she said, her voice rough. Kyle stood up. "You shouldn't be here. If Vareth catches you..." "Vareth is busy writing his victory speech," Sarilith said. She tossed him the bundle, a flight suit. "And he believes I am currently in my chambers, sedated by the court physician for emotional shock." She moved to the cell door, hacking the lock with a device she had clearly stolen. "We have 10 minutes before the shift change. Thorn is waiting at the hangar bay." Kale pulled on the flight suit over his ruined uniform. "The data drive?" he asked. "Destroyed," Sarilith said bitterly. Vareth crushed it under his boot in the council room. "We have nothing, no evidence, no leverage, and half the city thinks you blew up those barges." "Then why are you saving me?" Kale asked. He stopped, half-dressed, looking at her. Sarilith froze. She looked at him, and for a moment, the air in the sterile cell felt charged with everything they couldn't say. "Because," she whispered, "I know when a man is looking at me, and when a man is looking at a target. You never looked at me like a target, Kale, even when you should have." She opened the door. "Now move. Unless you want to find out if human necks are stronger than Lyran plasma blades." The escape was messy. They had to stun 2 guards in the corridor. Sarilith, to Kale's surprise, wielded a stun baton with terrifying efficiency, dropping a 200-pound trooper with a strike to the nerve cluster in the neck. I paid attention in the dojo. She panted, stepping over the body. They reached the private hangar. Thorn, the silent bodyguard, was waiting by the ramp of a small, sleek courier ship. The engines were already humming. Thorne nodded to Cale, a significant gesture from a man who usually looked at him like he was a bug, and ushered them inside. "Where are we going?" Cale asked as he strapped into the co-pilot seat. "We can't go to Earth. My own people will shoot me down." "We are going to the Ghost Moon," Sarilith said, taking the pilot's yoke. The ship blasted out of the hangar, punching through the atmospheric shield before the perimeter turrets could lock on. Sarilith flew with aggressive precision, diving into the debris field of the planet's rings to mask their signature. "The Ghost Moon?" Cale asked. "A drifting archive," Sarilith explained. "It is a derelict satellite from the First Contact era. It contains the physical records of the early negotiations, the records that Vareth and your corrupt diplomats claim never existed." "Why there?" "Because," Sarilith said, banking the ship hard to avoid an asteroid, "it is the only place in the system that is completely offline. The consortium's AI cannot touch it. The archive moon was a tomb of silence. It was a small gray rock, hollowed out and filled with rows of towering server banks that had been cold for decades. The air inside the facility was stale and freezing. Their flashlights cut through the gloom, illuminating dust motes that had been suspended for a century. "This place gives me the creeps," Cale muttered. They reached the central terminal. It was old tech, manual keyboards, holographic tape drives. Sarilith connected the ship's power core to the terminal. The ancient machines groaned to life, lights flickering on one by one. She began to search. "If the consortium is planning something big," she said, her breath misting in the cold air, "they would need to simulate it first. They would use the old strategic simulation cores housed here. They are isolated, secure." "Here," Kyle said, pointing to a file that had been accessed only 3 days ago. "Project Dissonance." He opened the file. A simulation map appeared. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a planet. Lyra Prime. Kyle watched the simulation play out. It showed a deployment of the emotion distortion frequency, but not just a localized burst like in the Undercity. This was a planetary blanket. "They aren't going to invade," Kyle whispered, horror dawning on him. Sarilith's hand flew to her mouth. The simulation showed the population of the capital city. The frequency hit. The euphoria index spiked, then the rage index. Then despair. "Mass hysteria," Sarilith said, her voice trembling. "Self-destruction. They are going to turn the population of the capital into a riot of madness. People will tear each other apart in the streets, and look at the timestamp," Cale said. T-12 hours. "The weapon isn't a bomb. It's the Coronation broadcast towers. They're going to hijack the global feed again. When the Regent speaks tomorrow to declare war, they'll activate the signal. They want a tragedy so big that war is the only option." Sarilith said, "They will sacrifice the capital to buy their market share." She stepped back from the console, shaking. "We can't stop it. We are 2 people on a dead rock. The fleet is mobilized. The courts are sealed." She sank onto a crate, burying her face in her hands. "It's over. Kyle. We lost." Kyle looked at the simulation, the red wave of death washing over the city. Then he looked at Sarilith. He walked over to her and knelt down. He took her hands, pulling them away from her face. "Look at me." She looked up. Her eyes were swimming with tears. "We haven't lost," Kyle said. "We have the source code, right here on this drive. If we can get back to the capital, get into the broadcast center, and upload the counter frequency." "We will never get close," Sarilith whispered. "They will shoot us out of the sky the moment we enter orbit." "Maybe," Cale said. "But do you have a better idea? Because I'm not ready to die on a moon that smells like old library books." Saralith laughed, a wet, choked sound. You are an idiot. Rourke, a brave, foolish, human idiot. We're both idiots, Kyle said. That's why we work. The silence of the archive pressed in on them. They were millions of miles from help, hunted by two civilizations, staring down the barrel of an apocalypse. And in that cold, dark room, the last wall between them crumbled. Saralith leaned forward. This time, there was no hesitation, no political calculation. I am afraid, she whispered. So am I, Cale admitted. She reached out, her hand cupping the back of his neck, pulling him in. Then let us be afraid together. They kissed. It was different from the kiss in the chambers. That had been reactive, a release of tension. This was deliberate. It was a claim. It was an acknowledgement that in a universe of lies and deep fakes and shifting alliances, this, the heat of their skin, the beat of their hearts, was the only true thing left. Cale wrapped his arms around her, pulling her off the crate and against him. The cold of the archive faded. There was a desperate tenderness in the way he held her, as if he could shield her from the gravity of the situation with his own body. I don't want to be a symbol anymore, Saralith murmured against his lips. I just want to be. Saralith, Cale finished for her. Just Saralith. They held each other for a long time, the holographic light of the apocalypse simulation bathing them in a red glow. It was a goodbye and a vow all at once. Then, Cale pulled back. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Let's go save your world, Saralith. The flight back was a blur of calculated velocity. Saralith pushed the courier ship's engines past the red line. They weren't sneaking in this time. They were racing. We have to hit the atmosphere at a steep angle, Cale said, reviewing the approach vector. If we come in over the magnetic poles, the interference might buy us a few seconds before the defense grid locks on. And then we crash land as close to the broadcast spire as possible and run like hell. The comms panel lit up. It wasn't a hail. It was a news feed. Saralith, look at this. The holographic screen showed the grand plaza of the capital. But it wasn't the festive crowd of the coronation. It was a scene of efficient brutality. Lines of prisoners were being marched into transports. Kyle recognized the faces. Valerius, the reformist senators, even Lady Lyra. They are rounding them up, Saralith said, her voice hardening into diamond. Varoth is purging the opposition before the broadcast. Cale saw the look on her face. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, focused fury. That is my family, she said quietly. She pushed the throttle forward. The ship shuddered as it hit the upper atmosphere. Hang on, Major. This is going to be a rough landing. Flames licked the viewport as the heat shielding began to glow. They were a meteor of vengeance falling from the sky. Kyle checked his weapon, a stolen plasma rifle from the prison break. Part 5 is going to be loud, isn't it? Cale yelled over the roar of re-entry. Saralith didn't look at him. She was staring at the city rapidly expanding in the window, her hands white-knuckled on the controls. Only if we survive the impact. The ship screamed down through the clouds, aiming for the heart of the conspiracy, carrying the only truth left in the galaxy. The smoke from their crash landing had barely cleared when Cale and Saralith breached the perimeter of the tribunal spire. The ship lay in ruin 3 sectors away, a crumpled heap of metal that had served its final purpose as a distraction, while the city's emergency services swarmed the burning wreckage, believing the fugitives dead. Kyle and Saralith moved through the shadows of the immense, needle-like prison tower. They were not alone. The city was under martial law. Drones swept the streets with searchlights that cut through the smog like solid beams of matter. Keep your head down, Kale hissed, pulling Sarilith into the alcove of a maintenance hatch. A patrol marched past, their boots striking the pavement in a terrifying unison. Sarilith was shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. She clutched a stolen security pass they had lifted from a stunned guard near the crash site. "The detention block is on the 40th level," she whispered. "My cousin and the reformist leaders will be held in the high-security wing. It is impenetrable from the outside." "Good thing we are already inside," Kyle said. They moved with the desperate efficiency of soldiers behind enemy lines. They bypassed the main lifts, which were DNA-locked, and scaled the service ladders inside the ventilation shafts. It was a brutal climb, the air hot and smelling of recycled ozone and grease. When they reached the 40th level, Kale kicked the grate open. They rolled out onto the polished black floor of the detention corridor. It was too quiet. Kale raised his plasma rifle. Something is wrong. There should be guards at every intersection. Sarilith stood up, smoothing her ruined flight suit. Perhaps the crash drew them away? "No," Kale said, his instincts screaming. "This is a choke point." Before he could finish, the lights in the corridor turned a violent red. Blast doors at both ends of the hall slammed shut with the sound of thunder. From the ceiling, automated turrets dropped down, their laser sights painting Kale's chest with dancing dots of light. And then, the door at the far end hissed open. Thorn stepped out. The silent bodyguard was fully armored, his helmet retracted to reveal a face that was scarred and impassive. He held a heavy repeater cannon, leveled directly at Sarilith. "Thorn," Sarilith gasped, taking a step forward. "Thank the stars. We need to accessing the—" "Stand down," Thorn said. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of emotion. Sarilith froze. "What?" I said, "Stand down. Highness, drop the weapons." Kale stepped in front of her, raising his rifle. "You traitorous son of a—" Thorn didn't hesitate. He fired a warning shot that singed the hair on Kale's ear and blasted a hole in the wall behind them. "The next one goes through your knee." "Human," Thorn said. "Drop it." Kale looked at the turrets, then at Thorn's cannon. It was simple math. He dropped the rifle. It clattered loudly on the floor. Sarilith looked at her protector, her expression crumbling. "You... Thorn, after everything? Regent Vareth pays better," Thorn said flatly. "And he is winning." He marched them down the hall at gunpoint, shoving them roughly toward the high-security cells. He swiped his clearance card, and the energy barrier to the main holding block dissolved. "Get in!" Thorn barked, shoving Kale so hard he stumbled and fell. Thorn followed them in, and the energy barrier snapped back into place behind him. The room was filled with the reformist prisoners. Valerius, the old strategist, looked up from a bench, his face bruised. Lady Lyra was pacing, looking furious rather than scared. "Sarilith," Lyra cried. "Oh, thank the void, and you brought the human. Are we being rescued or executed?" "That depends," Thorn said. He reached up and tapped a control on the wall panel. The security cameras in the room powered down. The audio sensors went dead. Then, the giant Lyran bodyguard slumped against the door, letting out a long, exhausted sigh. He lowered his cannon. That, he grumbled, was extremely close. Sarilith stared at him. "Thorn?" Thorn looked at her, and for the first time in her life, she saw him smile. It was a small, grim thing. "If I had not intercepted you, the automated defenses would have vaporized you in the corridor. Highness, Vareth has the kill-on-sight order active for your biosignature. The only way to get you inside alive was to arrest you myself." Kale picked himself up from the floor, rubbing his shoulder. "You could have mentioned that before you almost blew my ear off. I needed it to look real," Thorn said. The Regent is watching the feeds. Now, we have approximately 10 minutes before he expects me to file a processing report. Sarilith grabbed Thorn's armored hand, squeezing it. I doubted you. You are a politician, Thorn said. Paranoia is your trade. Protection is mine. He turned to the console. I can override the cell locks, but the corridor outside is swarming with Vareth's elite shock troopers. We cannot fight our way out, not with these numbers. Valerius hobbled forward. We do not need to fight them all when we just need to confuse them. Lyra stepped up, her eyes gleaming with a manic delight. Confuse them? Oh, I can do better than that. I can humiliate them. Thorn, Lyra said, give me access to the internal comms system, not the emergency channel, the general broadcast, the one that goes to every helmet and break room in the spire. Thorn hesitated, then plugged a data pad into the wall. You have 30 seconds before they triangulate the source. Lyra grabbed the microphone. She cleared her throat, put on her most vapid, high society accent, and keyed the mic. Attention, brave soldiers of the Dominion. This is Lady Lyra Vera speaking. I just wanted to share a little rumor I heard about the Regent Protector. Apparently, the reason he wears that high collar is to hide a terribly embarrassing rash he contracted from a fuzzy pet he keeps in his quarters. They say it itches terribly during speeches. If you see him twitching, now you know why. Also, Captain Halloway of the 3rd Guard, your wife knows about the lieutenant. Have a lovely war. The effect was instantaneous. Through the transparent walls of the cell block, they saw the guards in the corridor stiffen. Some looked at each other. Confusion rippled through the ranks. The strict, terrifying discipline of the Lyran military cracked for just a moment under the absurdity of the broadcast. Now! Cale shouted. Thorn hit the release. The cell doors slid open. The reformist leaders, energized by the chaos, grabbed weapons from the armory locker Thorn unlocked. They surged into the corridor. The guards, distracted and trying to suppress their own laughter or confusion, were slow to react. It was a brawl, short and violent. Thorn led the charge, a battering ram of armor. Cale covered the rear, using a stun baton he had snatched from a rack. They cleared the floor and barricaded the lift doors. We need a way out. Valerius shouted over the alarm sirens that finally began to wail. No, Sarilith said. She was standing at the main command terminal of the security station. We are not leaving. Not yet. She pulled the data drive from the console. Look at this. On the main screen, a fleet deployment map was flashing. Hundreds of red icons were moving away from the planet, heading for the jump points. They are mobilizing, Cale said. The entire armada. Emergency defense response. Sarilith read from the screen. Varoth has claimed that Earth has launched a stealth weapon. He is launching a preemptive strike on the human colonies in the Alpha Sector. Cale felt the blood drain from his face. If that fleet jumps, there is no stopping it. Earth will retaliate. It will be total war within 6 hours. Who authorized this? Cale demanded. Varoth can't launch a first strike without diplomatic provocation. Sarilith tapped the file. The authorization signature appeared. It was a dual-key encryption. One key belonged to Regent Varoth. The other key belonged to a human. Cale stared at the image of the ID badge attached to the file. He knew the face. Every human in the service knew the face. Ambassador Elias Vane, the architect of the peace accords. The man who had shaken hands with the Lyran Empress 10 years ago. The man who was currently on Earth, giving speeches about patience and unity. No, Cale whispered. Not him. Anyone but him. He is the collaborator, Sarilith said, her voice hollow. He has been feeding Varoth the codes. He is the one who sold out your team at the asteroid cathedral. Cale slammed his fist into the console. cracking the screen. He was my mentor. He signed my commission. He told me that peace was the only victory worth dying for. And he is selling it for profit, Thorn said from the doorway. War is a business, Major, and business is good. Sarilith turned to Kale. We have a choice. She looked at the communication array controls. We can broadcast this authorization file to Earth Command right now. If they see Vane's signature on a Lyran war order, they will arrest him. It will stop the human counterattack. Do it, Kale said. But, Sarilith interrupted, if we expose Vane now, Earth will panic. They will think the entire diplomatic corps is compromised. The hardliners on your side will seize control and launch the nukes just to be safe. It could fracture your government and cause a civil war on Earth. Kale hesitated. She was right. The revelation would shatter the coalition. But if we wait, Valerius croaked, rubbing his bruised jaw, the Lyran fleet will reach Alpha Sector. Millions of humans will burn. The Lyran public will demand blood. We cannot choose one side, Kale said. He looked at Sarilith. We have to burn them both. What do you mean? We don't send it to Earth Command, Kale said. And we don't send it to the Lyran Council. We send it to everyone. He pointed to the neutral frequency listed on the comms board. The interstellar buoy network, the whisper stream, Lyra breathed. It was an automated navigation network used by independent traders and civilian transports. It had no encryption, no sensors, and it reached every screen from the core worlds to the rim. If we upload the proof there, Sarilith said, realizing the magnitude of the plan, every civilian, every soldier, every mother and father on both Earth and Lyra Prime will see it at the same time. We strip away the spin, Kale said. We show them Vane and Varoth signing the same death warrant. It is political suicide, Valerius warned. You will be destroying the credibility of both governments. Anarchy will follow. Better anarchy than extinction, Sarilith said. She began to type. Thorn, hold the door. Kale, integrate the financial records we found on the ghost moon. We are going to light up the sky with the truth. The upload bar began to crawl across the screen. 20% outside. The blast doors shuddered as Varoth's troops brought up a plasma cutter. Sparks showered the room. 50%. They are cutting through, Thorn shouted, firing his cannon through the gap in the doors. 80%. Sarilith looked at Kyle. The blue light of the screen illuminated her face. She looked terrified and entirely resolute. Whatever happens next, she said, know that I do not regret the order I gave in the council chamber. Which one? Kyle asked, checking the charge on his stun baton. Bring him to my chambers, she quoted, a small, sad smile touching her lips. Upload complete. Sarilith hit the enter key. On the screen, a confirmation pulse rippled out. In seconds, billions of data pads, hollow screens, and ship consoles across 2 sectors would receive a priority file titled The Price of War. Now, Kale shouted, to the roof. They abandoned the security station, fleeing up the emergency stairs to the landing pad just as the blast doors exploded inward. They burst out onto the windswept landing platform of the tribunal spire. The city below was a sea of lights. But something was happening. Down in the streets, the movement was changing. The orderly march of the troops had stopped. Holographic billboards that had been showing Varoth's face were now displaying the leaked documents. The video of Vane and Varoth shaking hands over a star map of burning colonies was looping on the side of a mile-high skyscraper. It worked. Lyra gasped, looking over the edge. Look, the city is waking up. But the sky above them darkened. A massive shadow fell over the spire. Varoth's personal flagship, the Leviathan, descended through the clouds, its cannons training on the platform. A projection beam hit the platform, and a massive hologram of Regent Varoth appeared before them. He looked deranged, his eyes wide with fury. "You think this matters?" Varoth roared, his voice shaking the very foundations of the tower. "You think truth is stronger than fear? You are finished." "Varoth!" Sarilith shouted back, stepping into the projection. "The people know. The fleet is halting. The fleet is a tool." Varoth sneered. "And I have other tools." He raised a gauntleted hand. "If I cannot rule this world, Sarilith, I will break it." A low, vibrating hum began to emanate from the city center. It was a sound that was felt in the teeth and the bones. Cale grabbed his head as a spike of sudden, irrational terror drove into his brain. He saw Lyra fall to her knees, weeping uncontrollably. Valerius began to scream in rage, clawing at his own face. "The device!" Cale gasped, fighting the wave of artificial emotion. He activated the mental shielding protocol Chip had uploaded to his neural implant before he was captured. It barely dampened the noise. It wasn't a broadcast tower. It wasn't a satellite. Kyle looked at the energy readings on his stolen scanner. The signal was coming from the ground. "The amphitheater!" Kyle shouted over the roar of the wind. "The ceremonial dais! The device is buried under the stage!" Varoth's hologram laughed. "The activation sequence has begun," the Regent proclaimed. "In 10 minutes, the dissonance wave will reach critical mass. The population of the capital will tear itself apart in a frenzy of pure, distilled emotion. And when the dust settles, I will be the only one left to restore order." The hologram vanished. The Leviathan began to charge its main batteries, preparing to vaporize the tower and everyone on it. "We need a ship!" Thorn yelled. "There!" Kyle pointed. A small Lyran patrol skiff had just landed on the far side of the platform. The pilot clearly confused by the broadcast and the chaos. Cale didn't wait. He sprinted across the deck, dodging the suppressing fire from the Leviathan's secondary turrets. He tackled the pilot, throwing him out of the cockpit. "Get in!" Cale screamed. Sarilith, Thorn, Lyra, and Valerius scrambled on board. Cale slammed the throttle forward. The skiff shot off the edge of the tower just as a plasma bolt obliterated the spot where they had been standing. They dove toward the city, weaving through the traffic lanes. Below them, the streets were descending into madness. The dissonance wave was taking hold. Crowds were rioting, not with political purpose, but with animalistic fury. People were dancing on burning cars, fighting shadows, weeping in piles. "We have 10 minutes, Sarilith yelled from the co-pilot's seat. 10 minutes before the wave becomes permanent." Kyle pushed the engines to the breaking point. The amphitheater loomed ahead, a massive bowl of white stone in the center of the madness. He looked at Sarilith. "If we don't shut that thing down, there won't be a peace treaty," he said grimly. "There won't be anything. Then fly." "Major," Sarilith said, drawing her energy pistol. "Fly like you want to see tomorrow." The skiff did not land so much as it ceased to fly, turning into a fiery projectile that sheared through the marble pillars of the grand amphitheater's outer ring. Impact was a series of violent, bone-jarring concussions. Metal screamed as the hull buckled, plowing a trench through the pristine white stone of the ceremonial plaza before slamming into the base of the central dais. The cockpit canopy shattered, showering Cale and Sarilith in a rain of safety glass and sparks. Cale kicked the jammed release lever, his boot meeting resistance until the metal groaned and gave way. He scrambled out, coughing in the acrid smoke, and pulled Sarilith after him. "Are you whole?" he shouted over the roar of the burning engine. Sarilith nodded, wiping a smear of soot from her cheek. She looked up at the dais. The massive structure was vibrating, humming with a sound that felt like a drill pressing against a molar. The air around it shimmered, the light bending in nauseating waves. "The dissonance wave," Sarilith yelled, her voice thin against the overwhelming acoustic pressure. "It is cycling up to maximum output. We have to get underneath. The maintenance access is behind the main altar." They ran. The plaza was a nightmare of distorted physics. The device buried beneath them was not just broadcasting a motion, it was beginning to bleed enough energy to warp the local gravity field. Debris from the crash didn't fall, it drifted sideways. Dust motes swirled in impossible geometric patterns. As they reached the heavy blast doors of the understructure, Cale slapped the override panel. Nothing happened. The lock was dead. "Stand back!" He leveled his plasma rifle and fired 3 rapid shots into the locking mechanism. Molten slag hissed onto the floor, and he forced the doors open with a grunt of exertion. The corridor beyond was pitch black, save for the emergency strobes pulsing in a rhythmic, seizure-inducing red. "Thorn!" Cale tapped his comms. "We are in." "What is the status of the fleet?" "Static." Then, Thorn's voice, broken and distant. "Major. The flagship. Leviathan is descending. They are targeting the city. You have minutes." "We are moving," Kyle said. He looked at Sarilith. She was staring down the dark throat of the corridor. She was terrified. He could see it in the way her hands trembled, but her feet were planted like roots. "Stay close to me," Kyle said. "If gravity shifts, grab my harness. Do not let go." They descended into the belly of the beast. The interior of the amphitheater's foundation was a labyrinth of ancient engineering and modern sabotage. The consortium had retrofitted the old geothermal stabilizers with their own technology. Hybrid tech that pulsed with a sickening, violet light. They reached a catwalk suspended over a generator shaft that seemed to go down forever. Suddenly, Cale's boots left the grating. "Gravity shift," he roared. The entire orientation of the room flipped 90 degrees. The wall became the floor. The catwalk became a vertical ladder. Cale slammed into the metal siding. The wind knocked out of him. He scrambled for a grip, his rifle skittering away and falling into the abyss. Sarilith screamed as she fell past him. Cale lashed out, his hand closing around her wrist. The jolt nearly dislocated his shoulder. He swung there, dangling from a conduit pipe, holding the princess of the Dominion over a drop of 2,000 feet. "I have you," Cale gritted out, his muscles burning. He hauled her up, hand over hand, until they were both clinging to the conduit. "This is not just gravity," Sarilith gasped, staring at the walls. Look, the walls were breathing. The dissonance wave was penetrating the shielding. It was affecting their perception. The metal plates of the shaft were warping, twisting into faces. Cale blinked, and for a second the face in the metal was Lieutenant Jara, her eyes hollow, her mouth screaming a silent accusation. "You left us. Cale, you left us in the dark. It is not real," Cale whispered, squeezing his eyes shut. He felt Sarilith stiffen beside him. "Mother?" she whispered. Cale opened his eyes. Sarilith was staring at a patch of darkness that was coalescing into the shape of the late Empress. "You are weak, Sarilith," the phantom voice hissed, echoing inside their skulls. "You let the human touch you. You have tainted the bloodline. You are no queen. You are a traitor's whore." "No," Sarilith whimpered, shrinking back. "It's the machine," Cale shouted, shaking her. "Sarilith, look at me. It is the machine playing on your guilt." The phantom laughed. "He does not love you, child. He is a soldier. He is using you to save his own skin. Look at him. He is disgusted by you." Cale felt a spike of irrational anger. He looked at Sarilith and, for a horrifying second, he didn't see the woman he loved. He saw a Lyran oppressor. He saw the enemy who had killed his friends. A voice in his head, cold and logical, whispered, "Push her. Let her fall. End the war." He looked at his hand gripping her arm. His fingers loosened. Sarilith looked up at him. Her eyes were wide, reflecting his own sudden hatred. "Do it," the voice whispered. Cale bit his tongue. He bit it so hard that the sharp copper taste of blood flooded his mouth. The pain snapped him back to the present. "No!" Cale roared at the darkness. He yanked Sarilith closer, wrapping his arm around her waist. "Listen to me," he shouted, pressing his forehead against hers. "I am not him. I am not the enemy. And you are not your mother." Sarilith was trembling violently. "It wants us to fight," she sobbed. "It wants us to hate. Then we choose," Cale said fiercely. "We choose. Sarilith, do you trust me?" I do. Do you trust me more than your fear?" "Yes." "Then move." They scrambled along the conduit, fighting the hallucinations that tried to tear them apart. Shadows lunged at them with knives. The air turned into blood. But they kept physical contact, hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, using the tactile reality of each other to anchor their minds against the storm. They reached the core chamber. The core was a cavernous spherical room housing the device, a towering monolith of black chrome and pulsing crystal, thrumming with enough energy to level a continent. And standing on the command gantry, bathed in the violet light of the machine, was a figure. It was not Varath. It was a projection, a hard light hologram of the Regent, solid enough to touch, powered by the room's energy field. But behind the hologram, hooked into the neural interface of the machine, was a Lyran tech priest, his eyes rolled back in his head, acting as the living CPU for the weapon. So, the insects survived the jar. The Varath hologram boomed. His voice was everywhere, amplified by the walls. Sarilith stepped onto the gantry, her energy pistol drawn. "Shut it down. Varath, the fleet has paused. The people know the truth. You have lost." "Lost?" Varath laughed. It was a sound like grinding metal. "I do not need the fleet. Princess, I have this. In 3 minutes, the frequency will reach the aggression threshold. The population of this city will murder each other in the streets. And I will broadcast the carnage to the galaxy as proof that peace is a biological impossibility." He raised a hand. The hard light avatar coalesced into a blade. "And you, my dear Sarilith, will be the first casualty." The hologram lunged. It moved faster than a biological being, crossing the distance in a blur of light. Sarilith fired, but the bolt passed harmlessly through the hologram's torso. Cale didn't have a weapon. He had nothing but his mass and his momentum. He saw the blade of solid light swinging toward Sarilith's neck. He didn't think. He didn't weigh the tactical odds. Cale tackled Sarilith, shoving her to the side, and threw himself into the arc of the blade. The impact was like being hit by a freight train. The hard light blade slashed across his chest, searing through the flight suit and cutting deep into flesh and bone. The force of the blow threw him across the gantry. He slammed into the control console, sliding to the floor in a trail of blood. "Kyle!" Sarilith screamed. She scrambled toward him, but the Varath hologram blocked her path, looming over her. "Pathetic!" The Regent sneered. "A human shield. How fitting." Kyle gasped, clutching his chest. The pain was blinding, a white-hot fire that threatened to pull him under. He looked up. He saw the tech priest connected to the machine. The priest was twitching, his synchronization with the hologram faltering as he tried to maintain the complex construct. "Sarilith," Cale wheezed, pointing a shaking hand at the priest. "The interface. Shoot the interface." Varath raised the blade to finish her. Sarilith didn't look at the monster. She looked past him. She raised her pistol, aiming not at the threat, but at the fragile biological link behind it. "For the Dominion," she whispered. She fired. The plasma bolt struck the tech priest in the neural jack at the base of his skull. The interface exploded. The priest slumped forward, dead instantly. The Vareth hologram flickered. It let out a distorted roar of rage as its power source was severed. The hard light destabilized, dissolving into pixels of harmless violet static before vanishing completely. The humming of the machine died. The oppressive weight of the dissonance wave lifted from the room like a physical shroud. The gravity normalized. The hallucinations evaporated. Silence crashed back into the chamber. Sarilith dropped the gun. She fell to her knees beside Kale. Kale, she choked out, her hands hovering over the ruin of his chest. Kale lay still, his breathing shallow and ragged. The wound was cauterized by the energy blade, but the damage was massive. "Did we win?" he whispered. Sarilith scanned the console. The output reads 0. The broadcast has stopped. "Yes, Kale, we won." She tapped her comms bead, her voice breaking. "Thorn, medical evac. Now, I need a trauma team in the core." The ending of the war did not happen with a bang, but with a transmission. While Kale fought for his life in the medbay of the royal flagship, Sarilith stood in the center of the Grand Council chamber. She was still wearing her soot-stained flight suit, her hair wild, her face streaked with sweat and dirt. She refused to change. She refused to wash away the evidence of the battle. She stood before the holographic pickups that were broadcasting to every screen on Lyra Prime and Earth. Beside her, in a containment field, stood the captured Regent Vareth, stripped of his armor, looking small and defeated. "Citizens of the stars," Sarilith said. Her voice was not the melodic, practiced tone of a princess. It was the raw, exhausted voice of a survivor. "For generations, you have been told that our two species are destined for war. You have been told that the only safety lies in the silence of the grave." She gestured to the screen behind her. It showed the financial records, the communications between Vareth and Ambassador Vane, the blueprints of the dissonance weapon. "You were sold a lie," she continued. "A lie purchased with the blood of your children. A lie designed to keep you afraid, because afraid people are easy to rule. On Earth, the broadcast was playing in Times Square, in the Senate floor, in the barracks of the orbital defense grid. Kyle, watching from a biobed in the infirmary, saw the split-screen feed. He saw Earth's military police dragging Ambassador Elias Vane out of his office in Geneva. Vane was shouting, demanding immunity, but the cameras didn't look away. Sarilith looked into the camera. She seemed to be looking directly at Kale. "Today, the Dominion changes. There will be no more regents. There will be no more shadows, and we will build a coalition government, a government that answers to you." She paused, and for a moment, the steel in her spine softened. "A human soldier saved my life today. He saved this city. He proved that honor is not a matter of biology. It is a matter of choice. If we can choose trust in the dark, then we can choose peace in the light." She stepped back. The broadcast ended. Kale let his head fall back against the pillow. He closed his eyes. The pain was still there, a dull throb in his chest, but for the first time in his life. The war was gone. The recovery was slow. The politics were slower. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy underwent a painful, necessary surgery. The Shadow Consortium was dismantled piece by piece. Arrests were made in high offices on both worlds. The Lyran nobility kicked and screamed as Sarilith stripped them of their private fleets. But without Vareth and the dissonance weapon, they had no teeth. On Earth, the Reformist Party swept the emergency elections, using Kale's testimony as their platform. Kale himself was the subject of a fierce debate. The hardliners wanted him court-martialed for treason. The public wanted him given a medal. In the end, they settled for an honorable discharge and a diplomatic advisory role that effectively exiled him to Lyra Prime, which was exactly where he wanted to be. 3 months later, The nebula gardens had been restored. The glass dome, shattered during the riots, was whole again, filtering the starlight into soft ribbons of indigo and gold. The gravity here was set to a comfortable standard, the air smelling of night-blooming orchids. Kyle sat on a stone bench, watching the nebula swirl overhead. He moved a little stiffly, the cybernetic graft in his chest still twinged when it rained, a permanent reminder of the hard light blade. He heard the footsteps before he saw her. He didn't turn. He knew that cadence. "You are late," Kyle said. Sarilith walked into his line of sight. She was wearing simple robes of pale gray, the color of dawn. No jewels, no armor. "I am the Queen Regent," she said, sitting down beside him. "I am precisely on time. The universe is just early." Kale smiled. "How was the council?" "Loud." Sarilith sighed. "Valerius is complaining about the trade tariffs. Lyra is trying to turn the old torture dungeons into a nightclub. The usual." She looked at him. Her violet eyes were clear, unburdened by the shadows that had haunted them for so long. "And you, Kale? Do you regret it? Staying here?" Kale looked at his hands. He looked at the scar tissue visible at the collar of his tunic. "I lost my rank," he said. "I can never go back to Ohio. Half my planet thinks I'm a traitor." He turned to face her. "But I woke up this morning without wondering if I was going to die. So, no, I don't regret it." Sarilith reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm. "It will be difficult," she said quietly. "They will watch us. They will wait for us to fail. We are an anomaly. You and I. Peace is always an anomaly," Kale said. "That's why you have to fight for it." He squeezed her hand. "Besides, I have a very powerful friend. I hear she has a terrible reputation." Sarilith laughed. It was a genuine sound, light and free. "Oh, terrible," she agreed. "Do you know what they still whisper in the court? It has become a legend, the day the world changed." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, a playful glint in her eyes. "They say it all started because a barbarian was dragged before the throne." And the alien princess looked at him and said, "Bring him to my chambers." Kale finished for her, grinning. "And look what happened," Sarilith teased, her thumb brushing over his knuckles. "One reckless order, and now we have to fix 2 civilizations." She stood up, pulling him with her. "Come, Kale Rourke. The diplomatic envoy from the Outer Rim is arriving, and I need my advisor to tell me if they are lying." Kale stood, wincing slightly as his chest pulled, but standing tall. He didn't let go of her hand. "Lead the way, Highness." They walked out of the garden together, not as prisoner and captor, not as symbol and target, but as partners. Behind them, the nebula churned in the dark, vast and indifferent, but for the first time in 100 years, the stars looked a little less like the flash of gunfire and a little more like the lights of home.